What is the truth? I think the hardest question to answer when you leave a high demand religion, a capital T truth church that's built on its own certainty, is so what is the truth then? Like, if you're going to say that my way, this way, my system of rules, my dogma, my doctrines, my prophet, my cumulative interpretation of scripture that I hold as true is not the truth, then
Do you want to
what
know
is?
what it is?
It's probably the most common question I'm asked by people from the denomination that I come from. And it's not so much that it's a question that's hard to have an answer for. It's hard to have a short answer for, but it's more so that it's hard to get the person asking the question to hear your answer as an answer. And I think this is because the question itself, it wholly exists inside of the construct that the person asking it is confined in. They are bound by the biases of their construct, doctrinal rules of physics, assumptions of tradition, the gravity of their past, just as we are bound by the laws of physics in our reality. And their question expects, it's predicated on you remaining inside that construct as well. But for you, at some point, something was off about the construct. You read the book. You met the human. You found the edge of reason. It could no longer be dismissed as anomalous.
You wake up in your bed and believe.
You, at some point in your journey, took the
You
red
take the
pill.
red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
You recognize the boundaries of the construct. You saw the code, and now you can't unsee it. And yes, you can still plug in, you can still engage on the same plane as you had before. You can just now also move outside of it. The matrix hasn't changed. Your relationship to the matrix has changed.
Feel it when you go to work, when you go to church.
For some, there is no outside. There's no edge to the universe. There's nothing beyond the horizon. The matrix is all there is. And if they are not in the light, they are in darkness, correct? So when you come to them with your new altered perspective, it isn't simply a difference of opinion or translation or even a misunderstanding of the construct. You aren't simply disagreeing. You're attempting to defy gravity, to break the construct. You represent dissonance in and of yourself and need to be reconnected to truth, plugged back in. Recently, a presumably genuinely concerned gentleman from my Adventist background presented me with a specific form of this question. If Adventism and Ellen White's inspirations are not the truth, then what is truth, and who do you suppose has it? Now, immediately with this very first question in the conversation, I knew we'd found an impasse, because this is a conversation I've had many times. I find myself in deja vu with my family over this question. So I asked him, why would someone have to have it? Not to deflect, not to dismiss, but to address the assumption within the question head on, to point out that there are assumptions in that question. Because outside of the question of is there truth with a capital T, lies the assumption that even if there is, someone must have it. But why? As if to say, look, with your question, zoom out. Don't try to bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, recognize there is no spoon.
There is no spoon?
Then you'll see that it is not the spoon that bends, it is only yourself.
My friend
Responded by saying it, being the truth, is the only way to salvation. The whole point of any belief system. Now, I gotta admit, my conversations don't usually get there this fast, so I was a little bit excited and I probably jumped the gun, but I responded. So am I correct in hearing you say that doctrine, dogma, is the only way to salvation? Now, of course, had he answered that question, he would have backed off that statement a bit. He would have had to say something about Jesus, of course, but the dialogue did break down. And I imagine that that's because this exchange was happening over text message and not face to face. So my questions come across as a trap, dodgy, not wanting to answer the question. But I was answering, because getting to the things you don't even believe that are hiding inside your own questions is actually better than getting the answer you're looking for a lot of the time. And so when you come from these types of systems of absolute certainty, the code requires that the only way out of that system is a better system. Show me a group with more truth than this one, and I'll join that one. Give me a truth that will replace my capital T truth, and then and only then will I even listen to a critique of my capital T truth. But that's the problem. They want you to teach them how to fly inside the rules of their own gravity. The pursuit itself is flawed. No one can be told what the Matrix is.
You have to see it for yourself.
It's a flaw in the system that's been grafted over us that requires possession of the truth, this ill-defined word to encapsulate the sum total of every right and correct thing a person must believe and enact concerning the meaning and purpose of life and the universe and the only way to survive it. Its possession and near flawless implementation is a requirement for any remnant theology like mine of origin, but what is it really? For instance, if you've been taught that the Bible is a uniform singular book, yes, has many penmen, but one author, a book about a supernatural war between God and one of his own rogue creations, an angel, and that all of these parables and stories and metaphors of sheep and goats and wheats and tare, these aren't about believers and non-believers, but about the believers who will be saved versus the believers that won't be. Then that construct technically creates a system where belief in Jesus is immediately not the path to salvation anymore, right? Like it shows up on both sides of the equation. So in case math isn't your thing, if you compared two sets of differing values or characteristics on opposite sides of an equation, and you find that each set is multiplied by the same variable, faith, belief, then you can just remove that particular variable. You delete it from both sides. It's the first step to solving the equation. It's superfluous. If the goal isn't belief in the deity, but instead correct thoughts about the deity, then the question of salvation becomes whose thoughts are better. No, better's not good enough. Whose thoughts are best? No, best doesn't work either. Whose thoughts are true with a capital T? It's X equals 7, you nerd. So this is typically why these types of denominations have a prophet or prophets or a leader of some kind with final near divine authority. Something extra has to mark your group as particularly blessed or touched, inspired, because otherwise, what elevates your new or rediscovered translation to capital T truth from just your opinion or your preference, whether you actually prefer it or not? See, to create this type of certainty, something, somewhere, had to break the rules in a way nothing else, anywhere else can. For certainty to exist in a reality where there are so many interpretive choices and opinions that can be derived from the type of library of thought that the Bible is, one of them, and only one of them, has to be determined to be true. And if you're willing to say it's not mine, which I will maintain as the truth until you pull off a better trick, then whose is it? Show me the trick. So I can't answer the question in a way that'll seem satisfactory because I disagree with the premise. They want something better than air to breathe, but all I can really offer for them in return is...
You think that's air you're breathing now?
like the absolute certainty they want replaced is something they never actually had, but how do you break that down into a pill-sized portion? How does someone describe the outside of a construct? How do you explain that when you don't think the Bible is telling a single, consistent, literal, historic, inerrant story from start to finish, then it no longer has to? When you know that this particular collection of books, genealogies, poems, songs, myths, metaphors, self-reflections, oral traditions, creeds, pre-existing sources, personal letters to friends and specific communities at specific moments in time. Oh, and there's 4 Gospels. They misalign with each other in theologically relevant places. They repurpose those Old Testament prophets in some historically confounding places. And when you realize that all of these built together were never really intended by those authors to be a single consistent story from start to finish, then how could any single specific reading of all of it be the truth? How many truths has your single specific reading undergone over the years before you landed on this version? How many versions of the Matrix have there been? How many more versions will there be before we start asking some better questions?
Counting from the emergence of one integral anomaly to the emergence of the next, in which case this is the 6th version.
Either no one told me, or no one knows.
One question might be, what does the architecture tell us about the architect? What do the means tell us about the ends? If there is a capital T truth, and that truth was revealed in the Adventist movement, why would God choose to reveal the truth the way he did? Why would he purposely inspire a man to chain together this very specific series of verses from various biblical authors over time, only to lead him to a mistaken conclusion repeatedly? Why build a large movement on the back of a prophetic error, knowing that that error is going to nearly destroy the movement? It'll permanently affect its reputation of trustworthiness. Why do it that way?
You know the answer to that question.
But do you? You think you do, but you do not. You are here because you were sent here. You were told to come here, and then you obeyed.
Now, the answer from within the group seems to be that only a group of people that were so utterly devastated would have the dedication to study diligently enough to earnestly seek the real truth from God, truth he had hidden from every faithful believer before them for thousands of years. Even the biblical authors themselves wouldn't have put this together, only to begin finally revealing it one day after the prophecy fails. If that is hidden in the code, what does that say about the architect's character and his desire to see everyone in the truth? Why aren't we asking that question? What does it say about the movement itself? That the only doctrine unique to the denomination, the divine pivot that we got to after the prophecy failed, the only belief that justifies the denomination's existence, is the least understood within its own membership. Why is it the last thing evangelized? Why is the newest update installed autonomously overnight that changed nothing about the user experience except introducing a noticeable lag? Why is it the most urgent of afterthoughts?
Every program that is created must have a purpose. If it does not, it is deleted.
Inside the system, to ask why God does things the way he does is to ask why apples fall from trees. Why does the earth revolve around the sun? Why do humans need sleep? It's just the way that it is. His ways are higher than our ways. It's almost like the dissonance is too strong to ignore when you face it head on. Because deep down, I think we know the steak's not real.
I know the steak doesn't exist.
We still enjoy the flavor.
I know that when I put it in my mouth, the Matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
Saying, don't tell me what's wrong with the construct. Just fix it in a way I don't have to notice. But outside of the system, you realize these aren't actually questions that tell you anything about an architect. There's something else going on there. These are questions that tell you about the motivations, the intentions of the people that came before you. It's how they saw the system in its previous iterations. It's the lessons they learned, the lessons they didn't, lessons that we can take from each, like outside of the system. To have these conversations with someone is to remember how to be plugged in, remember how to navigate the path. You're no longer really bound by the physics.
What are you trying to tell me? That I can dodge bullets?
No, Neo. I'm trying to tell you that when you're ready, you won't have to.
I can point out things like the first couple of commandments infer that there are multiple gods. But if there's only one, why didn't it just say, worship me? Why does it say don't worship any of the other ones? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Me too.
This no longer alerts me that an intruder has hacked my system for me to understand that the text of the Bible is not univocally monotheistic.
Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress?
I was...
Look again.
It betrays nothing for me to watch the idea of unity in one type of belief develop, no matter how slowly. Progress doesn't negate inspiration. Common sense would argue the opposite. That's interesting. It's not a glitch. It doesn't trouble me that depending on which biblical history you're reading, either God causes David to count his soldiers so God could have reason to send an angel to kill 70,000 Israelites as a punishment, or Satan caused David to count them. But let's look at the differences here, right? I mean, it seems big at first, God or Satan, but not really, because both stories tell you that David counted his own people, and then God killed 70,000 of those people he counted for doing it. He could have just killed David. Honestly, offing David would have come in handy a few times if you really think about it, but instead, other people tend to suffer his consequences. It's almost like the people of Israel were trying to work out how their evolving idea of a God would view them as a people through a prism, a specific prism of stories that they were telling about their kings. Like their king's behavior was maybe a personification of the group's behavior, and good things happened under good kings until those good kings behaved badly. Bad things happened under bad kings, but what really made bad kings were the sins they allowed the people to commit, which, now that I think about it, often had something to do with worshiping those other non-existent gods.
It is inevitable.
But without all these stories being literally true, or without them all coming actually from the mouth of some all-powerful being, they can actually communicate a much deeper story than inerrant, infallible history ever could.
The Oracle. She told me
She told you exactly what you needed to hear. That's all.
That's interesting. Not a glitch. The creation stories, being cultural expressions, being mythologies of national origins, origins of the unbearable weight of choice, awareness of our own mortality. That's much more interesting than trying to explain how a loving God would use global floods, genocides, slavery, angels of death, disease, fire and brimstone raining from the sky when he gets in one of his moods. It's more inspired than a being who preordained a system he knew would fail, and while he crafted a path to truth, he knew very few people would ever find it purposely.
They cut the hard line. It's a trap. Get out! Oh no. Oh no.
But it's hard for a person that's not ready to have those conversations to hear that conversation. It's too nebulous to qualify as capital T truth. And God's only option, the only option he has left for himself, for those without capital T truth, is that fire and brimstone. Well, he has to wake him up from death first, and then fire and brimstone. And inside the construct I was raised in, I have to believe that. I have to believe that. and that God loves me more than anything else the universe ever could, including Peggy James, my mother. I have to hold in my brain at the same time that the greatest love the universe has ever known, the end-all and be-all of all, for one unrepented sin in my life, will, not might, will burn me alive. Yet my mother, a little septuagenarian lady in Oklahoma, creator of only two, would torch heaven and earth to spare her children, whether we asked her to help us or not. She doesn't love me nearly as much as God does.
Dodge this.
That's not interesting. That's a glitch.
We're in.